Welcome back to our channel where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. Today we bring you some news. Bravo Princess Anne, Princess Royal, exposed a royal coup inside the emergency summit in an extraordinary emergency conference that has reverberated through the uppermost ranks of the British monarchy. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, is said to have independently unveiled a covert scheme devised by Queen Camilla. The altercation occurring inside the tightly fortified confines of Buckingham Palace has purportedly left the royal family divided and cast a shadow of doubt over the future of King Charles III's reign. Insiders with profound understanding of the events depict a scenario of profound treachery and high-stakes strategizing, ending in a dramatic ultimatum that has successfully marginalized the Queen Consort and redefined the traditionally stoic Princess Anne as the monarchy's steadfast moral arbiter. A day that started in obscurity concluded with the fundamental pillars of the House of Windsor being profoundly unsettled. The dawn summons a royal family in turmoil. It started prior to the first beams of sunshine penetrating the dreary London haze. A barrage of urgent encrypted communications disrupted the pre-dawn tranquility of the royal apartments, awakening each senior family member from a restless sleep. The communication conveyed in the terse, solemn tones of the king's confidential secretary was unambiguous. His Majesty demands your immediate attendance. Non-negotiable. The directive had a foreboding significance that beyond a conventional royal appointment. This was not a briefing nor a family meal, it was a summons. As the dawn sky assumed a pale, frigid tone above the city, a convoy of black armored vehicles discreetly passed past the royal gates. Present were the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Catherine, the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, who arrived by private aircraft shrouded in secrecy, and lastly, Queen Camilla. Each came enveloped in a shared, tangible apprehension, although none articulated it verbally. In their eyes, a tempest of emotions surged, distrust, anxiety, and for some individuals, a more sinister element, ambition. Observers remarked on the strain shown on their faces. Prince William, towering and steadfast, stood with his jaw clenched, a muscle quivering in his face. The Princess of Wales. Catherine grasped his arm with a somewhat excessive firmness, her renowned composure a delicate facade concealing the underlying anxiousness. Prince Harry remained at the periphery of the assembly, a mere echo of his old identity, clearly disconcerted by the individuals around him. His appearance was perhaps the most significant indicator of the seriousness of the situation, a rejoining of the group he had so openly forsaken. Subsequently, Camilla emerged. The Queen Consort entered with her characteristic poise, a rehearsed smile adorning her lips. Her darting eyes, scanning the features of her family members in search of an ally or foe, revealed a discomfort she found difficult to conceal. The ambiance inside the palace was dense and stifling. The resounding footfall of the royals on the marble flooring of the grand corridor seemed to intensify the tension. Assistants and domestic personnel hurried to prepare the 1844 room, a venue usually designated for hosting the most esteemed visitors, now converted for a familial trial. They proceeded with downcast eyes, their expressions stoic, although their anxious energy coursed through the venerable structure. Servants who had served the crown for decades would subsequently disclose to trusted colleagues that they had never seen such unadulterated dread on the faces of the royal family, not even during the most perilous days of the War of the Waleses. Minutes passed, each one extending into an interminable duration. The family assembled in an uncomfortable, oppressive stillness. At last she manifested. Princess Anne was the last to enter. Her arrival exemplified calculated authority. The crisp, rhythmic impact of her heels on the clean parquet floor heralded her arrival before she was entirely visible. She traversed the room without acknowledging anybody, her stance rigid and her countenance inscrutable. In her palm, she firmly grasped a substantial sealed manila folder, a seemingly ordinary item that in this environment signified considerable importance. Although no one ventured to remark on it, all were aware. Her piercing, resolute gaze briefly met King Charles's, before she seated herself at the opulent circular table. In that brief interaction, a significant transformation occurred, an implicit warning traversed like a specter, and those who saw it experienced a sudden shiver. As Anne placed the folder before her and clasped her hands above it, an unsettling hush enveloped the room. It was no longer just expectation, it had become dread. Simultaneously, beyond the old stone walls, the global media had begun to assemble like vultures. Informed by the atypical assembly of royal cars and the abrupt annulment of minor royal commitments, journalists believed that a significant story was unfolding. Their extended optics were positioned, their inquiries already practiced. Speculation proliferated. There were murmurs of a health problem involving the king. Some referred to a constitutional crisis or potential abdication. However, no one, even the most experienced royal journalist, ventured to conceive the reality that was poised to disrupt the monarchy with unprecedented force. Sufficient the Princess Royal's initial statement. While the royals exchanged cold formal niceties in a vain effort to preserve an appearance of politeness, Princess Anne's voice pierced the atmosphere sharply. Sufficient. The solitary word weighed heavily on the atmosphere, silencing the subdued whispers and the faint, anxious chuckles that had been alleviating the intolerable strain. Even King Charles, who had been gazing at the polished wood of the table, as if imploring the agony to conclude before it started, abruptly lifted his head, his lips slightly ajar. Anne, regarded as the most steadfast, faithful, and restrained member of the family, elected to speak first, and her tone unmistakably conveyed frigid rage. She rose from her chair gradually and purposefully. Her fingers no longer rested on the sealed folder. Instead, they gripped the edge of the table as she leaned forward, her full attention, a predatory glare, fixed on Queen Camilla. "You have ridiculed this family," she said, her comments incisive, exact, and conveyed with a dispassionate coldness. Every sentence struck the quiet like a hammer strike. Camilla squirmed uneasily in her chair, her expression a conflict of defiance and growing apprehension. As the remainder of the family, William, Catherine, Harry, and the king, directed their attention on her, she prepared to articulate a counter-argument, but Anne offered her no respite. The Princess Royal made her first impactful declaration with unwavering determination. She said that Queen Camilla had been conducting a series of covert meetings, with key palace aides meetings concealed even from the king himself. Anne said that the meetings had a solitary, nefarious objective to methodically diminish the Prince and Princess of Wales's legitimate authority within the family and the monarchy. Audible inhalations disrupted the tranquility. Prince William's hand positioned on the table formed a fist, with his knuckles paling against the dark wood. Adjacent to him, Catherine's eyes shimmered with incredulity, her poise ultimately faltering. Even Prince Harry, who had devoted years to distancing himself from the palace machinations now transpiring before him, straightened in his seat, a rare intensity igniting in his eyes as he gazed at his stepmother. Camilla's lips opened in protest, but Anne hushed her with a singular authoritative raised hand. She persisted in her unyielding exposé, her voice remaining steadfast. The Princess Royal disclosed that Camilla's schemes go beyond just harming William and Catherine. Based on the materials she meticulously compiled, Camilla's genuine objective was far more ambitious and perilous. She aimed to create a legacy for her grandchildren, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes's offspring, assuring their ascendance in importance and recognition, so subverting a millennium of tradition. What began as murmurs of a power struggle has now been exposed as a comprehensive plot to alter the line of succession. The room descended into a paralyzing, oppressive quiet. All eyes shifted between the two women at the heart of this escalating conflict, Anne formidable and resolute, the self-designated accuser, and Camilla ensnared for the first time in a predicament she could neither charm nor articulate her way out of. However, Anne had not yet concluded. What she then disclosed would obliterate any last vestige of confidence in the room. The documentation, correspondence records, and an exposed conspiracy. Princess Anne not only made allegations, also presented proof. With smooth hands that concealed her inner fury, she unclasped the folder and started arranging its contents on the table. The sharp sound of sealed envelopes and dense stacks of paper striking the polished wood resonated more prominently than any speech. "Shall we commence with your own words?" Anne remarked, her tone laced with iciness. She presented the first letter to the king by sliding it over the table. The correspondence was directed to a top royal advisor and written in Queen Camilla's distinctive, refined handwriting. Camilla articulated her vision for a modernized monarchy, a strategic and intentional scheme to marginalize Prince William completely. The letter characterized him as unprepared and unduly swayed by his wife's plebeian sensibilities, while subtly promoting her own heritage as a foundation of stability and authentic aristocratic continuity. The language was ruthless, articulated with a stark clarity that permitted no ambiguity. Gasps resonated around the table. Catherine covered her lips, her complexion draining, as the harsh truth of the words registered. William's jaw clenched, a surge of wrath coursing through his neck as his gaze fixed intently on Camilla, who remained tense, her knuckles pale from gripping the armrests of her chair. Anne presented the subsequent paper without hesitation. This document was much more incriminating, a ledger outlining covert payments made to royal staff in return for their quiet and, more troublingly, their involvement. The sums were astonishing, accompanied with marginal annotations guaranteeing offshore account transfers and prospective peerages for participants. Subsequently, another letter arrived, this one including subtly implied threats. "Methods exist to eliminate impediments," one line said, inscribed in the same certain script that now quivered faintly in Camilla's lap. The words were emphasized with double underlining. William's rage was now a tangible presence in the room. His tightly clenched hand lay on the table, an unspoken menace. King Charles, his complexion pallid, instinctively grasped his chest, trying to breathe steadily. He parted his lips to articulate, however, no sound emerged. The treachery, articulated so simply in his wife's handwriting, seemed to sap all vigor from his body. Camilla ultimately spoke up, her voice trembling, as she sought to reject the letters as forgeries, characterizing them as a malicious and intricate scheme. "This is preposterous. I did not compose them," she persisted, her voice escalating in alarm. However, she saw that her point was being disregarded. The penmanship was obvious. The personal details of royal life mentioned in the letters could only have originated from her. The autographs at the bottom of each page validated what no denial could obliterate. Her confidence, her principal asset for decades, fractured and then disintegrated as she surveyed the room, finding no ally, no glimmer of support among the astonished and enraged faces confronting her. However, they were only inscriptions on a page. Anne's subsequent disclosure derived from her clandestine inquiry would undermine the monarchy's fundamental structure. The observer in the darkness. Anne's covert monitoring princess. Anne's subsequent revelation unveiled a concealed realm of clandestine assemblies in the palace's shadowy recesses where power, ambition, and treachery converged under the cover of darkness. Her voice diminished in volume but intensified in clarity, conveying a foreboding gravity as she recounted her transformation into the Crown's clandestine investigator. She articulated that for some months she had nurtured an increasing suspicion. Camilla's movements, a discreet exchange with a footman, an abrupt and unexplained absence from a state banquet, a recurring pattern of nocturnal activities had heightened her intuition. Having placed her trust in no one, she resolved to shadow the queen consort on 3 distinct occasions. Anne's remarks depicted a harrowing scene. In the late hours of the night, when the guards on duty were lethargic and the surveillance cameras were presumed inactive, Camilla would discreetly depart from the royal quarters. She would vanish down small, neglected service hallways, tunnels no longer charted or recalled by the majority of the present workers. Anne recounted following Camilla to a succession of secured chambers in an unused area of the palace, a part generally regarded as deserted and awaiting renovation. Under the faint illumination of a solitary bare bulb, Camilla encountered a cabal of influential individuals who ought never to have been given such secretive access. Anne identified them as prominent financiers associated with problems that the palace had diligently attempted to conceal. A disgraced former private secretary who was sacked years before amid allegations of information leakage, and political operatives known for their merciless tactics. These were not mere visits, Anne said, her gaze surveying the appalled expressions of her relatives. These were meticulously orchestrated meetings concealed from any official documentation, held in obscurity, with hushed voices and vigilant eyes on the entrance. The family remained in shocked silence as Anne recounted what she had overheard over the frigid, solitary nights of spying. Discussions on the discreet, almost imperceptible modification of public perception of the line of succession were articulated as if they were just moving furniture. Advisors deliberated on strategies to shape media narratives, including the dissemination of tales to sympathetic journalists that would undermine William's leadership capabilities and portray Catherine as a social climber whose influence posed a threat to the institution. Every aspect was meticulously considered. Each action and danger was evaluated with dispassionate ethical indifference. Subsequently, the revelation emerged that instilled trepidation even among the most stoic individuals there. Anne referenced witnesses, devoted servants, and long-serving individuals who had assisted her mother, Queen Elizabeth II, for many years, whom she had discreetly convinced to testify. They reported seeing the exchange of bags filled with cash after these sessions. Untraceable payments, Anne said solemnly, were rendered in silence and subsequently consumed by the shadows. Her voice faltered, however, somewhat for the first time, as she confessed the distress it had caused her to see the events transpire. She had previously stood in the darkness, grasping the same folder that now lay before them, contemplating if she would ever possess the fortitude to disclose what she had seen. However, with all attention directed on her and Camilla evidently deteriorating, she presented her evidence with the somber conviction of a judge delivering a verdict. Nevertheless, despite this overwhelming proof, the most intimate and harrowing impact was yet to arrive. The Phantom of Diana, a concealed truth for generations. Just as the royal family believed they had encountered the most distressing revelations, Princess Anne unveiled an unforeseen development letters written by Diana, Princess of Wales, concealed by Camilla for more than 25 years. As Anne's fingertips grazed a last weathered envelope from the folder, the ambiance in the room transformed. A more acute and agonizing concentration enveloped the table. Her voice quivered not from frailty, but from a lifetime of suppressed rage. These, she said, her voice deep and resonant, were not composed in palace offices or dictated under vigilant scrutiny. These were the exact words of Diana. She elucidated her discovery of them hidden behind a locked box at the rear of a drawer in Camilla's private study at Clarence House, obscured by a fake panel. Initially, she encountered them by chance. Nevertheless, compelled by an inescapable suspicion, she pursued them until she located them. The hush in the room intensified into a horrible, breathless void as Anne explained the letter's origins. Their relationship originated during the tumultuous latter years of Diana's life. Some were inscribed in a hasty, frenetic handwriting. Others were more calm, almost excruciatingly so. Diana revealed anxieties she had concealed even from her most trusted associates, anxieties that Camilla's aspirations extended far beyond just securing Charles, and that eventually she would devise a method to harm Diana's offspring. Anne's comments struck with the force of physical strikes. She started reading from the first letter, her voice unwavering despite the emotional gravity of the text. It articulated Diana's increasing conviction that her boys faced peril not from external adversaries but from internal sources. "Heed my words," Anne read as Diana's voice seemed to resonate across the decades. "She will persist until she acquires what she deems rightfully hers. It will cost William and Harry everything if it goes unnoticed." At that moment, Prince William could no longer maintain his composure. He averted his attention to the table, his wide shoulders quivering. When he finally spoke, his voice faltered beneath the considerable burden of it all. She was aware. The words were almost a whisper, but they pierced the quiet like a scream. Catherine extended her hand, trembling violently. Prince Harry gazed unflinchingly across the table, his expression a visage of dread and poignant acknowledgment. For him, this was not only a discovery, it was the affirmation of a lifetime of hushed anxieties. Camilla's poise ultimately disintegrated entirely. Her cheeks reddened with a blend of fury and bewilderment as she emphatically denied ever having seen the letters. "They are counterfeit. They must have been strategically placed to incriminate me." She wept, her voice piercing with urgency. "I would never have retained them, much less concealed them." However, Anne just responded by unfolding the subsequent page of paper and resuming her reading. Diana's distinctive cursive penmanship confronted all present. Her distinctive expressions, profound musings on her boys, and unmistakable signature were evident on every page. The room erupted into a tumult of gasps, stifled sobbing, and restrained anger. King Charles, his hands now obviously quivering, reclined in his chair as if the atmosphere in the room had become toxic. Catherine's eyes overflowed with emotions she no longer attempted to conceal. Every statement Anne vocalized further shattered the family's delicate facade, revealing the underlying festering pains. Nevertheless, the most astonishing disclosures, the conclusive evidence of Camilla's financial entanglement, remained forthcoming. The network of deception. Tracing the finances. During the emergency meeting, Princess Anne presented a series of financial transactions that exposed the extent of Queen Camilla's efforts to acquire influence and authority. The hushed rustle of papers yielded to a profound stillness as Anne unfurled another batch of documents, this time with a purposeful finality that no one dared disrupt. What she then disclosed dismantled the last illusions about Camilla's machinations. A clandestine trust fund concealed for years under a network of shell corporations and aliases resided quietly in Camilla's name, its balance amounting to tens of millions of pounds. Anne's voice remained unwavering as she enumerated the dates of significant deposits, each aligned with pivotal instances of political maneuvering within the family. The origin of the funds was much more unsettling. Anne said that the trust had received contributions from anonymous benefactors associated with contentious foreign billionaires and weapons dealers, individuals historically relegated to the periphery of royal affairs, but unexpectedly gained favor and access due to Camilla's influence. Gasps emanated from the table as Anne linked the anonymous identities to incidents that everyone present now saw in a dismal new perspective, a dubious state accolade conferred, and a profitable government contract bestowed upon a donor's enterprise. However, she did not cease her actions there. The financial trail extended beyond Camilla's accounts. Anne presented bank documents that documented direct payments to many royal assistance persons who had previously been regarded as close confidants. Mortgages were settled instantaneously. Unaccounted bonuses were discreetly distributed, all Anne demanded in return for their quiet and collaboration. The tension escalated to an intolerable level when Anne revealed evidence of substantial amounts being directed to the caretakers of Camilla's grandkids. Each deposit was meticulously synchronized with the advancement of her clandestine strategy to enhance their public prominence. Catherine instinctively covered her lips once again, as William leaned in, his whole demeanor concentrated in a stare of unadulterated fury directed at Camilla. Subsequently, there emerged the conclusive and incriminating evidence, a collection of verified papers outlining offshore accounts in Panama and the Cayman Islands. Their presence was irrefutable, the evidence authenticated and confirmed. It revealed a network of deception that extended well beyond the family's expectations. The aides positioned near the room's periphery shuffled uneasily their professional facades, faltering as they tried to evade Anne's penetrating, accusing stare. King Charles remained still, his breathing weak and his skin pallid. He seemed to be on the verge of collapse. William's wrath had become a quiet, formidable presence. His eyes narrowed, and as piercing as daggers were focused only on Camilla, who no longer feigned any defense. She sat vulnerable and vanquished, while the structure of her aspirations was deconstructed incrementally before her. However, Princess Anne's most formidable action was yet to unfold. An unforeseen ultimatum. The ultimatum: depart, discreetly, or I disclose publicly. As the whole family gazed at Queen Camilla in shocked, appalled silence, Princess Anne administered her ultimate ruthless strike. You will depart discreetly, or I will disclose this to the public. The comments struck with the force of a hammer, obliterating the little serenity left in the room. Anne's voice, firm but infused with righteous indignation, had an authority that allowed no possibility for discussion. For the first time, Camilla's power, carefully cultivated over decades and fiercely protected, commenced to disintegrate before their eyes. Anne moved forward, her eyes resolute, and asserted that she would not under any circumstances let Camilla to retain her status as queen consort. The proof was incontrovertible, the treachery unforgivable. Anne would ensure that justice was served even if it required exposing the whole story to the relentless scrutiny of the worldwide media. She articulated her warning unequivocally. Should Camilla fail to consent to resign from her official responsibilities and forfeit her title within 24 hours, she would disclose all materials, the correspondence, financial documents, surveillance data, and sworn statements from the devoted staff to the media. She did not only state it. She vowed it, her words resonating with certain gravity. The ensuing hush was overwhelming. Catherine, positioned to her left, straightened her shoulders and up her chin, unmistakably demonstrating unity with Anne. William's head inclined in a single intentional nod, his jaw taut, his gaze intense, silently endorsing his aunt's demand. Across the table, Prince Harry's expression conveyed a complex amalgamation of vindication, sadness, and wrath that immobilized him in his seat. His hands were tightly squeezed into fists on his lap, but he did not attempt to stand in Camilla's defense. Subsequently, Charles emerged. He sat like a man emptied, paralyzed by the incontrovertible reality of his wife's actions. The king's gaze shifted anxiously between his sister and his wife, a mute, fervent appeal for another world. Nevertheless, no words of dissent emerged from his mouth. At that moment, his silence spoke more than any statement could. It was an acknowledgment of defeat, a capitulation to the inexorable force his sister had transformed into. Nonetheless, it was Camilla's response that inflicted the most profound impact. For the first time in her public existence, she seemed to disintegrate entirely. Tears of embarrassment and anger filled her eyes and cascaded down her cheeks as she sobbed, imploring Anne and the others for pity. She said that she had not intended for it to escalate to this extent, that her actions were driven by fear and a desperate desire to establish her legacy. However, Anne remained unperturbed. Her determination, shaped by a lifetime of obligation, remained steadfast. The atmosphere became so laden with stress that respiration became difficult. As Anne began collecting her files, certain the issue was over, Camilla said something audibly inciting one more startling encounter. The ultimate revelation. A redeemer. Not an antagonist. With tears cascading down her cheeks, Queen Camilla rose, her voice trembling but resolute, and disclosed a purpose so astonishing that it left Princess Anne temporarily speechless. "Do you believe I undertook this for my own benefit?" She wept, her voice escalating, infused with an unusual fervent determination. She gazed straight at Anne, then at William. "I undertook this action to safeguard the monarchy from you." Amidst tears that barely concealed her rage, Camilla asserted that she had never schemed for power out of avarice. She said that every action she took was intended to save the institution from its own shortcomings. She charged William and Catherine of being dangerously naive, adopting a populist, celebrity-oriented approach that was undermining the majesty and authority of the crown. She said that they were succumbing to external influences aimed at undermining the family's foundations. "I observed it occurring long before anyone else would acknowledge it," she said, her voice becoming more resolute. "I resolved to act silently and resolutely before it became too late." Her distorted rationale posited that elevating her own lineage to a position of power constituted not a betrayal, but a protective measure, an endeavor to ensure the crown's future remained in trustworthy hands, untainted by what she termed the poison of modernity lurking outside the palace gates. Each bribe, clandestine meeting, and concealed account, she rationalized them all as essential sacrifices to protect the monarchy from its self-inflicted demise. "Do you believe I intended to cause you harm?" She wept, her eyes directed towards William. "I have solely endeavored to safeguard what you are too oblivious to recognize is deteriorating." In her perception, she was not the antagonist of this narrative. She served as the family's clandestine guardian, the only one prepared to engage in unsavory tasks, while the others feigned ignorance of the issues at hand. Anne hesitated for the first time. A fleeting expression, neither pity nor empathy, but rather a reluctant comprehension of the distorted rationale appeared on her face. She derided Camilla's remarks, but could not completely conceal the subtle hesitancy in her gaze, a little fissure in her front of confidence. The family disintegrated into turmoil. A few younger royals present started to mutter their allegiances, fluctuating between Anne's unwavering quest for justice and Camilla's fervent, if misguided, appeal. Prince Harry averted his eyes, seeming conflicted, while King Charles sank farther into his chair, trapped between astonishment and a semblance of resignation that was disturbingly palpable. As the dust settled, Princess Anne faced her brother, the king. Her visage was once again as unyielding as rock. She spoke a last ominous statement that determined Camilla's destiny and established the trajectory for the monarchy's next chapter. "You will manage this, Charles," she said, her tone subdued but resolute. "Or I will," she said thereafter, adding a last vow that lingered ominously, "never again." The consequences, a fragmented palace, a redefined future. In the ensuing silence, the royal family confronted the extensive devastation. Individually, they departed from the table, unable to endure the burden of one another's gaze. No parting words were said as they withdrew into the passageways, each escaping the specters that now lingered in the 1844 room. King Charles was the first individual to vanish. His shoulders sagged under an unseen burden, his face gaunt and pallid. He retreated down a secluded corridor and confined himself to his chambers, declining to engage in further conversation. His silence demonstrated the extent to which the tragedy had shattered him. Camilla stayed still for an extended while until she, too, reclaimed what was left of her dignity. She provided neither a last appeal nor farewell remarks. With her head down, she discreetly departed the castle by a side door. Her destiny, formerly that of a queen, is now as precarious as the monarchy she endeavored to reform. William and Catherine paused momentarily, their hands unconsciously intertwining. Their silence conveyed a tacit commitment to safeguard their family from experiencing such turmoil again. Disturbed but cohesive, they pivoted and departed their silhouettes, advancing in flawless synchrony. Princess Anne remained. Long after the others had she lingered, her gaze affixed on the vacant table where confidences had been exposed and trust had been irreparably shattered. The folder remained before her, its function fulfilled. Her determination remained steadfast, her demeanor forged from the same calm resilience that had sustained her throughout the encounter. She understood that the way ahead would be laden with challenges. The public would need to be informed of a meticulously crafted narrative on the Queen Consort's ill health, or desire for privacy. However, the regulations had been irrevocably altered behind the scenes. The Princess Royal, long regarded as the monarchy's diligent worker, has proven to be its paramount protector. As the royal gates shut that day, the external world remained oblivious to the tempest that had transpired. However, for individuals in the House of Windsor, circumstances would irrevocably change. The crown endured, however, the family that bore it was irrevocably transformed. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts, and goodbye for now.